But there's also things that are coming to the web that enable things that we never even thought possible, right? So there's a little section called Prepare to Impossible that talks about kind of these amazing things that are coming to the web that we didn't even really realize were possible a year or two ago. So a good example of one of those is WebAssembly, right? This is the ability to take code that was written in C or Rust or some other language. It's meant to be a compiled thing that runs as a binary, and you compile it into a format that can run in the browser. And this opens up just mind-boggling capabilities of what you can do in the browser. Suddenly Photoshop, the full Photoshop runs in the browser. I mean, to me, that is amazing. But the capabilities, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. They're just endless. Another example is AI in the browser, right? So we were all getting very excited about AI, and we're using all these services, sending our data off to them willy-nilly. But AI can actually run right in the browser. There's very small language models, I guess. But they run right inside the browser. You do need a certain amount of memory. You need to download them. But you can run them in the browser, and then your data's private. You can do things locally that you don't really want to go out to a service to use, or you can work offline and have an LLM assisting you. So those are the kinds of and there's others. There's a couple others I'm going to mention as well. But those are the other things that I want to touch on is kind of these new exciting possibilities for things that you can do in the browser now that weren't even possible a year or two ago. And where is that going to lead WordPress in the future?
Hey, everybody. It's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined by a good friend, Adam. Hey, Adam. How you doing?
Great.
Awesome. Hey, man, you've got a talk coming up. WordCamp EU is happening in 2 weeks and a day. Very exciting. What are you talking about this time?
Yeah, my talk is about new web capabilities and kind of how they impact WordPress, how we might use them in WordPress.
Okay.
So I'm kind of going over some new capabilities that are coming to the web, maybe some things that have been around for a while. A lot of it's kind of cutting edge stuff and exploring how we can use it in WordPress.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of APIs that WordPress developers may or may not be familiar with. And yeah, it's basically a talk about what's kind of new on the web, how it applies to WordPress, and then as a developer, kind of how you can keep up with that, how you can make sense of it all.
Okay. So digging in here a little bit, I know that just in the latest release, 6.8, we've updated it now so that we're prefetching.
Yes.
Is that one of the things you're talking about, or is that like old school?
I mean, that was new, and now it's already in course, so it's hard to say it's new. But that is a really cool new feature. That's the speculative loading API. So that's the ability to tell the browser, hey, there's some URLs that I want you to preload or pre-render. And in core right now, we're using sort of the most conservative approach because there's a risk as you're pre-rendering pages that users will not visit those pages. The advantage is if they do visit the page, then it's going to load much more quickly. So prefetching is where you preload all the resources of the page. Pre-rendering is where you actually pre-render the page like it's almost in another tab. So you can imagine if you click on a link that's been pre-rendered, it's instant navigation. So in core right now, we actually only start the prefetching, which is the more conservative, when you click on the link on desktop or on mobile, like when you push down. So it's maybe just 100 milliseconds between the click and the release, but that extra time actually does improve performance. And if you are a developer and you know that there's a specific URL users are very likely to click on, you can add that. So there's filters in place. But yes, that is definitely one of them. So one of the ones that relates to that builds on that is something we don't have yet in core, and it's called the View Transitions API. And this is the ability to tell the browser as the user transitions from one state to another. This could be from one page to another page, or it could be from one state of a single page app to another state. You tell the browser, I want you to animate this element from here to this element here. And you can set up different elements and different animations, but like at its basic implementation, you can imagine you're on a post list page, on an archive page, and you click on a post title, and instead of just the page kind of going blank and the resulting page loading, you get this transition where the title kind of gets bigger and it moves into place where it's going to be in the resulting page, and then the resulting page renders. So the browser automatically can animate between the source page and the destination page, and you're just sort of telling it which elements need to move where. So I've got a great little demo of that. My talk is sort of filled with these different APIs and then small little demos showing them in WordPress. So I've got a demo of one of my colleagues built just an API for WordPress where themes can opt in. So a theme can just say, I want to do this without doing basically anything, and it automatically does these transitions for things like post titles, where it's an obvious, that's always going to be something. But you could see like on a WooCommerce site where you had products, for example, and you click on a product and it enlarges, just creates this beautiful, almost like single page app experience. And that pairs very nicely with the prefetch, because if you prefetched or pre-rendered that page, that transition is going to work that much better.
Okay.
Yep.
Really, really cool. All right, so I don't want to give away your whole talk.
Yeah.
People, you got to go to the talk and you'll get all this stuff. But I want to dig a little bit more into where do these APIs come from?
Yeah. That's a great question. So the basic source is developer pain points, right? So it's easy to look out on the web and find places where developers have struggled forever to try to achieve what they're going for. I mean, I remember back in the day when the main struggle was just getting your code or your CSS to work across browsers because there were so many incompatibilities. So the big things that have come along recently are Baseline, which is the set of standard features that all browsers support, and then Europe, which is the annual program that the browsers engage in to add new features that they all agree upon. These are the new features we want to land into essentially Baseline this year. So there's a process that usually happens, I think, around October, where they opened up a GitHub repo and you can make comments and feedback. Of course, they're also, the browsers are looking at developers, seeing what they're building, what are common, the common things are where developers use a JavaScript library to do something that maybe the browser should just be doing by itself. That's a really common example. One that was announced quite recently is the Carousel API. And I'm going to have some great demos of that. But that's the ability to build like carousels, like that we typically use a library like swiper.js for, but build them entirely with CSS. So you can just get rid of your JavaScript. Now, the libraries are always going to be able to do something fancier maybe or better. Like these won't necessarily get rid of the libraries, but for a lot of basic use cases, you'll be able to just implement these things with CSS. So that's an example where it's easy to go out and look at the web and say, like, so many sites use these carousels, use these sliders. Every one of them uses some kind of JavaScript library, and there's a cost to that. There's an overhead for downloading those libraries. Those libraries typically operate on the main thread, so they're blocking of other things that your browser might be trying to do, whereas these CSS-based animations don't run on the main thread, right? So they're not interfering with the other JavaScript that you're also trying to run. So there's a lot of advantages. So that's another example of one I'm going to be talking about. But I think to answer your question, like where did these come from? It comes from surveying developers. And at the end of my talk, I'm going to have a QR code asking people to fill out a survey. And one of the questions is like, what are the pain points? What are the things that you are struggling with or always go to a JavaScript library to do that you just wish the browser could do without help? That Excellent. You feel like this should just be built in.
Excellent. Okay, so there's an API, right? Great, this Carousel API is out or whatever. Until WordPress implements it into core, how do developers take advantage of these in WordPress?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these things can be built into plugins or themes. So for the carousel, I think Elementor just had an announcement at I/O that they have the CSS carousel block they're working on. So that's a great example of a big theme, or it's a plugin, I guess, implementing it. So any slider, for example, a slider plugin could implement CSS instead of their JavaScript library and maybe falling back to their JavaScript library, or maybe they can eliminate their JavaScript library entirely. I mean, I think that's the sort of world that the browsers envision in the future is there's less JavaScript because the browsers are more capable, right? And so far, I think we've talked about developer pain points and developer struggles or things that are hard to do, but there's also things that are coming to the web that enable things that we never even thought possible, right? So there's a little section called Prepare to Impossible that talks about kind of these amazing things that are coming to the web that we didn't even really realize were possible a year or two ago. So a good example of one of those is WebAssembly, right? This is the ability to take code that was written in C or Rust or some other language. It's meant to be a compiled thing that runs as a binary, and you compile it into a format that can run in the browser. And this opens up just mind-boggling capabilities of what you can do in the browser. Suddenly Photoshop, the full Photoshop runs in the browser. I mean, to me, that is amazing. But the capabilities, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. They're just endless. Another example is AI in the browser, right? So we were all getting very excited about AI, and we're using all these services, sending our data off to them willy-nilly. But AI can actually run right in the browser. There's very small language models, I guess. But they run right inside the browser. You do need a certain amount of memory. You need to download them. But you can run them in the browser, and then your data's private. You could do things locally that you don't really want to go out to a service to use, or you can work offline and have an LLM assisting you. So those are the kinds of and there's others. There's a couple others I'm going to mention as well. But those are the other things that I want to touch on is kind of these new exciting possibilities for things that you can do in the browser now that weren't even possible a year or two ago. And where is that going to lead WordPress in the future?
Okay, really exciting. So, and just touching on WebAssembly, Birgit just kind of helped me understand that Playground runs off of WebAssembly. So there's an exciting example right there.
Oh, that's great. I actually didn't realize that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense that it does.
Okay. So, all right. So we're seeing, developer pain points, and then these APIs come out, and then they slowly get integrated into core. From a core contributor perspective, where do you see, either experienced or new developers can come in and start contributing to the project and really actually being helpful, as opposed to maybe just being noisy and being more of a distraction? Like, what are some tips you have for people who want to start contributing?
Okay, sure. And this is, I guess, a little separate from the topic of my talk because a lot of these things are not really in core yet. But I would say overall, as new contributors, I do a lot of mentoring of new contributors. So I think, first of all, I just want to acknowledge it's very challenging as a new contributor to just speak up at all. I think, obviously we have those tags both in Gutenberg and in core track about good new bugs. It's a good place for users to start. I think doing testing is a great way. So I can't express how helpful it is as a core committer to come to a ticket and see that it's been well tested by someone else than the reporter, right? So a reporter comes, I've got this bug, I'm uploading, a recent bug I dealt with, I'm uploading PNG images, and my beautiful 24-bit images are degrading into 8-bit images since WordPress 6.8. Okay, that's great that you reported the bug. But now there's someone else who comes in and they say, I reproduced this bug. Like, I took the sample image, I went to my WordPress site, I uploaded it, I verified that I checked before 6.8, and on 6.7 it worked fine. Someone who actually validates that. It's a straightforward task for a contributor, right? All they have to do, the instructions are usually right there. You just have to go through the instructions and say, I reproduced this, here's the system I used, here are the results I found. That is immensely helpful. It might not feel like much of a contribution. It definitely gets you credit as a contributor. So don't shy away from just doing those simple testing tests. That would be I would recommend that. Yeah. And then I would say, secondly, is just find a set of tickets that you feel affect you. If there's something that you feel passionate about, that can be a great motivator. And the other thing is just don't be discouraged when you make a contribution and it's not immediately recognized. We are all overworked contributors. I might have 100 tickets that I own that are in various stages of abandonment or moving forward. So I may miss that a contributor has asked for feedback. So it's important to understand that just because someone doesn't notice that you contributed, it doesn't mean like it's not personal. It's just that everyone's busy. So I would just say keep moving on. Just keep contributing across as many tickets as you can find to work on, and eventually something will land. It's kind of a long-term commitment. Sometimes it can take months and months and months before the thing that you did that seemed so straightforward actually gets merged, and that's part of the process. It's a time-consuming process doing open source contribution.
No, and I appreciate that. And I know we went off course there, but it's a topic that I want to keep hitting on because like Kinsta, we're involved with sponsoring contributors and encouraging people to contribute. So it's always great to kind of get some feedback from the experts in the field. Returning to your talk again, as far as who should be attending this, who do you think is like the ideal person that should be coming in and absorbing all of this knowledge?
So I think the developers will get the most out of it. People who are building websites or building plugins or themes. They'll probably get the most out of it because they'll probably hear about some new APIs they haven't heard about, and they'll get excited about maybe using them. I think site owners who are just interested in what's happening on the web, I'm just kind of keeping up with what's happening on the web, what new things are out there. I think it'd be interesting to them, but maybe less impactful in terms of what they do in their day-to-day. But those are that's sort of the target.
Perfect. I don't want to give away too much more of the talk, but if there was like one more thing in there that you want to tease people with, what do you got?
Well, so I already did all the teasing, I think, talking about AI and WebAssembly, but I'll just talk about one more aspect of the talk, which is, I'm not sure, like we talked about pain points and we talked about like the impossible things. The sort of middle ground is things that you could do now, maybe that you couldn't really do before, but they're not like exciting things like AI. So one example of this is that I think is a great, it's just like there's a couple examples, but one that I really like is the customizable select. So this is the select element that we're all used to. It's a drop down when you select a username from a user list or a currency from a currency drop down. We can now add HTML to these elements. So this is brand new. In the past, when you added a select element, it was just a select element. The operating system provided the UI for it. And if you wanted to do something fancier, like add icons, for example, to your dropdown, you needed to use a library like select2. Now that you can add HTML into select elements, which means you can put images right inside your select element. So I have a bunch of demos of implementing that in WordPress, but you can just imagine anywhere that you have a dropdown, you can enhance it now, make it more graphically appealing, and also make it better for users, right? So part of this is making the web better for users. If they can have a dropdown like a user list and it has the gravatar icons next to each username, that's going to make it, especially if you just recognize someone's gravatar, it's going to make it much easier for you to select the right user, right? So it's a small thing. It's something that the web really couldn't do before. Now we can do it, and I want people to know about it, because if they don't know about it, they're never going to use it. So
Sure.
That's definitely part of the talk, is just sort of spreading the word. Here are these new things. There's a lot of resources online to find out. Like, I'm not going to go into great detail about each API, and there's a whole slew of APIs that I will not touch on. I'm just sort of picking and choosing the ones that I find most exciting. So there's a lot of follow-up study that developers can do to try to learn more. And like I said, I've given some links on the talk about how to keep up with this kind of stuff.
Excellent, excellent. I think it's exciting to think about this in terms of we're kind of going to get a glimpse of maybe what WordPress will be doing in the future and what people can start working on now. To kind of wrap things up a little bit, how do you see, and I'm novice here, total developer noob talking, but do all of these kind of integrate into the block builder, or do they have the capability of integrating?
Yeah, I mean, some of these are actual UI features that we can build into the block builder itself.
Okay.
So there's a user selector in, like, when you're choosing the post author, right? And that could have the gravatar images. But also a lot of these APIs apply more to the front end. And they might be block specific. So like a CSS carousel block is a good example. We don't have a carousel block currently in core. There is no carousel block. And that actually might be something, we have this sort of general rule in core about only landing things that are useful to 80% of site owners. Carousels, it's kind of like an 80-20 rule. Like if it doesn't benefit 80% of users, then we consider it plugin territory, right? It's easy to add a plugin to add a feature. So there are a bunch of new blocks proposed for Gutenberg right now that are not. There's a talk about making these sort of canonical blocks. I'm not exactly sure what that means. You can install blocks just from the block inserter. If you type a / and then type the name of a block that you don't have installed, if it's in the block directory, WordPress will download it and install it for you. So we kind of already have that capability to have these. I think maybe what canonical blocks will be sort of officially tagged somehow as coming from core, as coming from the WordPress team.
Okay.
But I think that may happen with certain new capabilities. A lot of these are not available in all browsers, so that's another criteria that we have in WordPress core, is we typically only land features unless they're progressive enhancements, meaning that the browsers that don't support the feature don't degrade. So we only support the feature if it's available in all modern browsers. Again, unless it's something that is an enhancement that users who don't have the feature won't experience negatively.
Okay.
So that is a challenge for landing these types of features, both in Gutenberg and in core. And so it may take time. That said, we can do experiments. So we have the Performance Lab plugin. We're doing like performance experiments. Some of these things, like the view transitions, for example, falls into performance because it's a perceived performance thing. Feel like your site is faster when it's working, right? So I think that's been proposed as a Performance Lab plugin, which is a great way for users to check it out.
Awesome.
Yeah. But as to whether these things, how quickly these things will land in core, a lot of the things are small and they might land quickly. But for some of the newer things, it's going to take a while because we have to wait till all the browsers support it. And some of these APIs, frankly, are so new that they're still iterating on them. They're still improving them. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, and as we're talking here, I'm thinking through my head, another great audience for this talk is plugin developers, right? Because they might be able to identify something. And maybe they only get like a year or 2 years before it's in core, but I mean, that's still a year or 2 years of, potentially selling more or doing things like that. So That would be interesting.
For sure. Yeah, and in some cases, this might replace a part of a plugin or a feature of a plugin. So a good example of that is a Slider Revolution, which is a very popular plugin that does incredible animations and full page displays, and one of its features is scroll-driven animation. So this is the ability for animations to be triggered or tied directly to scrolling. And that's a new feature coming that will be available in CSS. So the author of that plugin can take that feature, switch it over to CSS, and pull that part of the JavaScript out. Of course, the plugin does a zillion other things other than scroll-driven animations. This is just a small part of that plugin. But it's an example of where an API, or like, for example, any form plugin could add those customizable selects that I was talking about as a feature of their plugin. It could even be something that differentiated your plugin, the fact that you had these new features that other plugins didn't have. So
All right.
I think we will see adoption of these features as they become more well known. People understand the advantages of them. You've got improved performance, typically accessible out of the box, so you don't have to worry about accessibility. And then works without JavaScript. Like literally, you could turn off JavaScript and it would work. And also, you're not blocking your main thread. You're not downloading extra JavaScript. So all these features sort of share that in common in that they're built into the platform.
Okay.
So anytime you can leverage a platform feature versus a third-party library to drive some aspect of your plugin, it's probably to your benefit, unless there's some shortcoming, and then in that case I wouldn't hear about it, because that's the ideal is for these features to be able to replace what these JavaScript libraries have helped us do for so many years.
It's awesome, the full circle of this. JavaScript ate the internet, and then now we're trying to slowly remove JavaScript.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to watch all of that happen.
I saw a proposal recently from Chrome to start caching some of the most popular libraries like jQuery, so that the browser would just have a copy of it. And if you were calling for that version, you wouldn't even have to download it, which makes so much sense. It's like, okay, let's just make that part of the platform, right?
Yeah.
Everyone uses it. Why are we downloading it? And caching used to be that you would cache across sites, but that is no longer the case. Every site you visit, you get a new copy of jQuery.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Wow,
caches are key to
insane.
domains now. Browser caches are double. So your cache for each domain is separate.
Okay, and so maybe that explains why my each Chrome tab is so immense and taking up all the memory.
Yeah, there's isolation there.
Switching gears here real quick and starting to wrap things up. Basel, have you been to Basel before?
No, I have not. I have been to Switzerland. I've been to Zurich, but not to Basel. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be
all right.
fun.
So one thing that keeps coming up is swimming the Rhine.
Yes.
Are you up for going for a swim in the Rhine with me?
I'm planning on it. I'm going to buy one of those dry bags too. I'm a river rafter, so I'm ready to get in the water at a moment's notice.
Awesome. All right, let's work on. I want to get as big a crew of WordPressers as possible floating the Rhine.
Sounds great.
We'll get some people to get up on the bridges and take pictures.
Yeah, maybe we can try to form a W, floating down the river.
I love it. I love it. All right, we'll start getting to work on that. Adam, it's always wonderful to speak with you. Thank you for spending time with me. I look forward to seeing you in Basel. As always, if people want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways for them to reach out?
The easiest one for me to say is LinkedIn/Adam Silverstein. And then I'm also on Blue Sky Social. My handle is Round Earth, but it's bluesky.roundearther or something. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right.
Well, Adam, WordPress Slack too.
All right. Absolutely. All right. Well, we will see you in just a couple of weeks. I appreciate your time and have a great day.
Great. Thank you so much.